Attention seekers.
That's why he confessed he didn't want somebody else getting his credit.
Murderers seeking fame.
I'm the one. I'm the killer.
They play a deadly game with the police and the public. What drives their acts of brutality?
My easiest way to take care of things was just to kill them.
And who is most evil? A scale exists to measure the darkest corners of human behavior. From impulse killings to madness-fueled violence. Calculated acts of cruelty, torture, and brutality. Forensics now reveals those among us who are most evil. Attention-seeking murderers. Killers looking for recognition. For them, murder is only a means to an end. Their true desire is to achieve fame and notoriety. Son of Sam terrorizes New York, making sure his name is splashed across the headlines. A killer torments police in Canada, daring them to catch him before he strikes again. The happy-faced killer takes credit for more than 100 murders. Is he one of the worst serial killers of all time? Or just looking for notoriety? What motivates attention-seeking murderers? How can we understand their actions? Now there is a scale with 22 levels that decodes a killer's motive, method, and mind. The more heinous the crime and the more rational the perpetrator, the higher the criminal is placed on the scale. The creator of this scale, Dr. Michael Stone, forensic psychiatrist, Columbia University. As he investigates the cases of those who taunt the public, Dr. Stone uncovers certain trends.
Amongst attention seekers, there is a number of noticeable patterns. Almost all are driven by a lust for power over others. A few wish for celebrity status, yet without the public knowing their name. Unable to achieve notoriety through acceptable means, they achieve it through murder.
One of the most cunning attention-seeking murderers is David Berkowitz, otherwise known as the Son of Sam. April 17th, 1977, New York City. A young couple is shot and killed in their car. Police find an anonymous letter in the street. The writer claims his father will force him to kill again and cryptically identifies himself as the Son of Sam. The killer strikes fear in the heart of New York City.
New Yorkers are supposed to have a reputation for being able to cope with anything, but that trait has been severely tested this hot summer.
Over 19 months, 15 people are attacked and 6 killed. After many of the crimes, the murderer sends letters to the police and media alike. He promises to kill again. No one feels safe.
David Berkowitz, who gave himself the name Son of Sam, is a quintessential attention seeker. The need to be the center of attention, even if it is attention fueled by hatred, is part of his warped personality that developed early in his life.
Richard David Falco is born in Brooklyn, New York in the summer of 1953. He is immediately put up for adoption and taken in by Nathan and Pearl Berkowitz. Young David finds it difficult to shake the feeling of being abandoned by his birth mother. He begins to cry out for recognition with aggression. He becomes jealous of his adoptive mother's affection for a pet parakeet. He poisons the bird with cleaning fluid, believing he has a right to her undivided attention.
Children often behave outrageously when they seek attention. But Berkowitz's actions show a wanton disregard for life. The taking of a life is, after all, a formidable line to cross.
In his teens, Berkowitz's adoptive mother, Pearl, dies of cancer. David is devastated. His feelings of rejection deepen, and his resentment grows. He descends into isolation. Berkowitz casts about looking for fulfillment. He joins the volunteer police department, community college, the army. Still, he feels isolated and unwanted. Berkowitz's adoptive father moves to Florida, and David rents a room in the Bronx. Far from family, with few friends, he begins to set fires in rubbish heaps, abandoned cars, empty buildings. Over 3 years, he claims to set 1,411 fires and keeps painstaking notes of every incident.
Setting fires gives Berkowitz a sense of power and identity that he never experienced before. For him, this must have been an intoxicating experience.
On Mother's Day, 1975, Berkowitz finds his birth mother and discovers that she has a daughter. He is overwhelmed that she kept another child, but gave him up. His profound loneliness makes him desperate for the love, acceptance, and attention he believes he deserves. No longer satisfied with setting fires, his crimes escalate. July 29th, 1976, Berkowitz shoots 2 women as they sit in their car. One of them dies. It is his first murder. The story makes the front page of the paper. He adores the headlines.
Reading about his crimes in the paper would have been a fulfilling moment for Berkowitz. Such recognition for a man who felt unnoticeable and rejected by the world seems to have encouraged him to commit more crimes.
Because of the handgun he uses, the police dub him the .44 caliber killer.
Good evening. In New York early this morning, the .44 caliber killer tried to kill again.
Berkowitz continues his attacks in New York. The city is in a panic.
People wouldn't come out at night. They're really scared. And I mean, when they're scared, that's all they do is talk about the killer.
April 17th, 1977. Berkowitz attacks again. 2 people are shot in the head and killed.
The girl was covered in blood. It was a horror. This guy screaming, just screaming and screaming.
At the crime scene, police find a letter. In it, Berkowitz calls himself the son of Sam and threatens to kill again.
By leaving this letter at the crime scene, Berkowitz is drawing still more attention to his crimes. No longer content for the murders to simply be mentioned in the paper, he creates the identity of Son of Sam, by which the whole world will soon know him.
A month later, Berkowitz pens a letter to crime reporter Jimmy Breslin of the Daily News. Sam won't let me stop killing until he gets his fill of blood. You will see my handiwork at the next job. When they publish the letter, the Daily News breaks sales records. The Son of Sam is a media sensation. But police still have no leads.
The attention received through his correspondence with the press gave Berkowitz something he had never achieved on his own, a sense of accomplishment and the respect of others.
Finally, after 19 months and 6 deaths, a break in the case. Police approach Berkowitz for a traffic violation. They demand to know who he is. He smiles maniacally and says, "I'm him. I'm the Son of Sam. What took you so long?" Following his arrest, Berkowitz claims that Sam is a demon in his neighbor's dog who ordered him to kill. David Berkowitz eventually pleads guilty and is sentenced to 315 years in jail. He later admits the demon dog story is a hoax, one final grab for attention.
Berkowitz wasn't satisfied just to kill. He needed the attention of the media. And just any headline wasn't enough. He created an evil persona designed to make him a legend. The grandiose quality of his actions, the reveling in a feeling of superiority vis-a-vis the authorities, push him even higher on my scale than a multiple murderer. I placed him at level 17, a level reserved for manipulative killers who punish and torment society at large.
David Berkowitz seemingly acted without fear. Instead of covering up his crimes, he reached out to both police and the media. Thrill seekers normally pose danger only to themselves. But there are others like Berkowitz, whose indifference to fear enables a shocking capacity for violence. What can science reveal about those who are not afraid of consequences?
These kids seek out and really enjoy dangerous things that everybody else would find fearful.
At the University of New Orleans, Dr. Paul Frick studies where aggression begins by examining children and adolescents. His research demonstrates that children with both callous and unemotional traits are at a higher risk for developing dangerous and aggressive behavior.
Fear and distress are both negative emotions that they seem to be missing. The kids with callous and emotional traits and conduct problems tend to be the most aggressive and violent offenders.
Dr. Frick uses a visually driven experiment to test for callous, unemotional traits that indicate fearlessness. A dot probe test measures the subject's response time to photographs shown on a monitor.
Two pictures, one on top of each other, flash on the screen, followed by a dot. They hit one button if the dot follows the top picture, another button if it follows the bottom picture. And you press one of those two buttons as quickly as you can.
Results are measured in milliseconds, allowing researchers to determine the brain's preconscious response.
We're trying to get a response that doesn't have them thinking about the content, but really gets at their immediate response that is more automatic.
Some photos are neutral. Others are emotionally charged.
The normal response for a child would be to recognize a dot following those emotional pictures quicker than a dot following a neutral picture.
But those with callous, unemotional traits that lead to fearlessness do not have this heightened response.
What we find is callous and emotional kids don't show any difference between those distressing pictures and neutral pictures, or show a slower response to those distressing pictures.
They have not developed the normal empathetic reaction to images of those in pain, nor the feelings of fear or apprehension when imagining their own pain. The incapacity for empathy and inability to process fear can prove to be a dangerous combination.
They just don't pay attention to the effects of their behaviors on others. They don't attend to the fact that it's really hurting the other person.
Is it possible that attention-seeking killers lack the capacity for empathy from earliest childhood? Are these murderers unable to fear punishment? Some killers portray these exact qualities, achieving the notoriety they desire with their very gruesome and very public actions. 1974, Wichita, Kansas. The Wichita Eagle Beacon receives a mysterious letter. Line after line reveals the details of a gruesome slaughter. The letter is signed BTK. Bind, torture, kill. With each new murder comes an announcement. Poems, letters, dolls, designed to call attention to his acts of evil. BTK creates a criminal persona that no one can ignore.
BTK began today's letter with a question. How many do I have to kill before I get a name in the paper or some national attention?
Over 17 years, he claims 10 victims, all in his own city. But in February 2005, His need for attention undoes him. Instead of a letter, he sends authorities a computer disk. Police trace the disk back to a church computer used by the killer. BTK is caught and identified as Dennis Rader, married with 2 children and prominent in his community. He is unafraid of being found out.
And she screamed and jumped on the bed and strangled her manually.
You indicated this woman lived down the street from you. Did she know you?
Casually, we'd walk by and wave. She liked to work in her yard as well as I like to work. It's just a neighborly type thing. It wasn't anything personal.
Both Dennis Rader and David Berkowitz invented evil alter egos to draw attention, as well as to deceive and terrorize the public. But because Dennis Rader bound and tortured his victims, I place him on the highest level of my scale, level 22, the level reserved for psychopathic serial killers who torture their victims.
1969. San Francisco. A city lives in fear of a murderer calling himself the Zodiac.
He's an absolutely ruthless, completely merciless killer.
He executes 5 people, approaching them on lovers' lanes, gunning them down or stabbing them to death. He leaves police clues and sends the press taunts and warnings contained in cryptic ciphers. In each one, he promises to strike again. Although the Zodiac Killer claims 5 victims in 3 years, he is never apprehended. The alter ego he created continues to inspire intrigue from the public.
Attention seekers believe they can outsmart the authorities. In this sense, they are fearless, unafraid of the effects their actions have on others or on themselves. This deeply narcissistic tendency is at the root of their taunts and is classic thrill-seeking behavior.
October 14th, 1995. Abbotsford, British Columbia. 5:45 a.m. 16-year-old Misty Cockrell stumbles into an emergency room. She is badly beaten and barely conscious.
She was delirious. Eventually, we discovered that she had 7 pieces of her skull embedded in her brain. She kept saying her friend Tanya was left behind.
Police discover Tanya Smith 20 miles away at a popular fishing spot. Her clothes are spread across the bushes. Her body is found floating by the riverbank. Sergeant Bill Emery is the lead investigator on the case.
Usually, scenes of crime are taken to the point where they try to cover up every piece of evidence that they leave behind. This was not the case here. This person was not trying to cover up anything.
None of the evidence left behind points to a potential suspect. But before long, the killer announces himself to police.
We really didn't know what we had until we received the first phone call.
Within days of the attack, 911 operators receive a call from a man with surprisingly detailed information about the crime scene. He claims that he is the killer.
We knew that we had a very serious offender on our hands that was not afraid to contact police, to brag that he was a killer, and the fact that he enjoyed it was something that we were not prepared for.
The call is traced to a phone booth. Police rush to the scene, anxious to find any leads. Instead, they receive another call. This time he asks, "Do you think I'm stupid enough to leave fingerprints behind?"
And that just showed that this person is calculating, that he knows what he's doing, that he is, like the arsonist, willing to light the fire and stand back and watch. But even worse, he's a killer.
Hours later, police receive another call.
I'm the one. You're giving you the chance to try and find me. I'll be cruising around looking for someone else.
And this was the telephone call that really put fear into our hearts because he stated that he was out driving around looking for someone else.
A race against time has begun.
Not only were you afraid that you were going to get another victim, he was telling you were going to get another victim. So it was like, you really have to hurry up and get this guy because he's threatening to kill again, and he's just playing you.
Emery's team investigates thousands of tips, but have no solid leads. Many in town panic, fearing the man the press has dubbed the Abbey Killer.
The clock was ticking, and each day we just thank God that we didn't have another victim yet.
4 months after the attack, an anonymous call is made to a local radio station.
Each call, you could tell that he was becoming more and more excited about the game. You could tell in his voice that he didn't believe that we were onto him at all. And he was right.
The caller demands they look in the parking lot. There, they find the defaced headstone of Tanya Smith, the killer's first victim, tossed on the roof of a vehicle.
Well, in my 32 years, I have never heard of anything that even compares to that. And all he cares about is recognition. He's either going to get it by phoning you or by doing something totally bizarre.
On the headstone are scribbled more threats. She's not the first, and she won't be the last.
You start second-guessing yourself. You start second-guessing everything. And you're wondering if he's watching you, or if he's watching your family, or if he's out driving around looking for another victim like he says.
A few days later, the killer announces himself to the public again. A package containing a note wrapped around a wrench crashes through the front window of an Abbotsford home. The note reads, "Hello, it's me. I'm bad and will not be caught." From the Abbey Killer. With the clock ticking, the Abbotsford police turn to the killer's own voice to help find him.
The voice you are about to hear is the voice of the man who murdered Tanya Smith and attempted to murder Misty Cockrell.
Beside a walkway behind a tree.
Okay, sir, where are you getting this from?
I'm the killer.
By the release of this tape, our investigators are confident that a member of the general public will recognize the voice and share that information with the police.
We received a telephone call from a woman that stated that she believed the voice was that of her son. She stated that his name was Terry Grant Michael Driver.
A 30-year-old local print setter, Terry Driver seems an unlikely suspect. Married with 2 kids, he has no criminal record. To examine whether Driver fits the profile of an attention-seeking murderer, Dr. Stone explores his history.
At first glance, many attention seekers appear to lead normal lives. Like all of us, they desire recognition and praise. But something in these murderers' isolated backgrounds pushes them toward violence.
January 1965. Terry Driver is born in rural British Columbia. By age 6, he displays such aggressive behavior that his parents are unable to cope. They send him away to a social services school. For 6 years, he remains alone at the school while his younger siblings live with their parents. At age 12, Driver returns home. He lives in the shadow of his father, a highly decorated law enforcement official. Driver attempts to join the police force after high school, but is rejected. Still wanting to feel important, he begins his own patrol of the neighborhood, listening to a police radio and calling in tips about petty thefts. Over many years, he makes hundreds of calls to the police hotline.
For Driver, the police took on for him the meaning of parents. Getting the attention of a police officer, even for trivial reasons, may have satisfied a deep and powerful need. As this need grew over time, Driver turned to more shocking acts of evil to receive the attention he craved.
In October 1997, Terry Driver is convicted of the murder of Tanya Smith and the rape and assault on Misty Cockrell. He is sentenced to life in prison.
Terry Driver's evil appears twofold. He wasn't satisfied simply to terrorize Abbotsford. He seems to feel superior to authorities. This arrogance is evident in his ongoing taunts, the desecration of Tanya Smith's headstone, and most of all, in the attack on Misty Cockerill and Tanya Smith. Although we only killed one victim, I put him at level 16 on my scale, the place reserved for self-centered psychopaths who commit multiple vicious acts.
With their taunts and threats, Terry Driver and David Berkowitz showed a callous disregard for their victims. What causes some killers to feel no compassion or empathy? Dr. Roy Baumeister thinks the answer may lie in something simple: social rejection. Dr. Baumeister studies self-control, violence, and aggression at the University of Florida.
Being included is basic to our survival. I think what happens in rejected people is their emotion system has shut down.
Dr. Baumeister theorizes that social rejection can lead to an inability for people to register pain, both physically and emotionally. To test this theory, he recruits subjects and examines their physical pain threshold.
The person comes in and we assess pain by, there's a small device that you put on the person's finger and it gradually increases the pressure.
The subject indicates when they begin to feel pain and when the pain becomes intolerable.
The purpose of the first step is to get a baseline measure of how sensitive to pain the person is.
Dr. Baumeister then induces the feeling of social rejection. Participants are given a personality questionnaire they are told is part of the research. But instead of honest feedback, some are told their questionnaires indicate that they will end up alone in life.
You might have friends and relationships now, but by your mid-20s, most of these will have drifted away.
After they experience this rejection, the patients are again subjected to physical pain.
We administer the pain measure exactly the same as we did the first time, and this enables us to see, has the person's sensitivity to pain changed?
Those who experienced rejection are now able to withstand much more pain.
They are effectively numb. They will sit there for a much longer time before they say it starts to hurt. It doesn't seem to bother them as much.
But not only does their sensitivity to physical pain shift, Baumeister theorizes that a person's emotional awareness also becomes impaired.
Empathy holds us back from doing cruel and violent and hurtful things to others, and if people lose this capacity to feel sorry for others, that's going to make them more willing and more capable of performing violent acts.
Among those who kill for attention, many have long histories of rejection. Could their lonely backgrounds impede their ability to feel empathy for the people they kill?
If you want to speculate about the effects of accumulated rejections, whether this lack of empathy would then become chronic so that you would feel it all the time, that's a very disturbing thought. Certainly, it seems a very likely extension of the patterns that we've observed.
How far are some murderers willing to go to get the attention they crave? Some of the most evil even take credit for crimes they didn't commit. 1995. Long-haul truck driver Keith Jesperson pleads guilty to the murders of 4 people and is sentenced to life in prison. His crimes are accompanied by letters to police and the media claiming responsibility for the murders and signed with a mocking happy face. Once behind bars, Jesperson says he committed more than just 4 murders.
Well, I've told the number is up to around 166 people.
Is Jesperson truly one of the most prolific serial killers in history? Or is he simply scheming for more attention?
Notoriety is Jesperson's main motivation for his crimes. His boast of such a large number of victims would seem to lack credibility. But once someone has proven the capacity to kill, their claims must be taken seriously.
Authorities are able to eliminate Jesperson as a suspect in many murders. In 1998, Jesperson claims he murdered Bobby Crescenzi. Crescenzi's husband is convicted of the crime. investigators discover he is feeding Jesperson information about the case to make the claims more credible. While Jesperson could be responsible for other murders, he is an attention seeker known to lie, and authorities must be careful. 2006, Santa Clara, California. Detective Ron Bruce heads up the cold case unit for the local police department. He is investigating the 1993 murder of an unidentified Jane Doe. He is committed to learning who she is and who killed her. Her abandoned body is found in a ditch off the highway, badly decomposed. There are no leads. Bruce comes across a letter Keith Jesperson wrote to the Oregonian newspaper, including details specific to the case. The letter is damning. Jesperson gives an eerily accurate account of the location of the body.
I put her body on or near a pile of rocks about 50 yards north of Highway 152, westbound about 20 miles from Santanella, which, if you threw a dart, you couldn't get any closer than that.
The case seems solid, but with Jesperson, Detective Bruce must rule out a grab for more attention.
He thrives on the notoriety of being the happy-faced serial killer. He likes having this story out there because it validates him as a killer.
Attributing this victim's death to the wrong perpetrator would mean a killer remains at large, and Bruce does not wish to play into Jesperson's twisted ploys for attention.
What you have here is a true person of evil.
To be certain Jesperson committed the murders, Detective Bruce visits him in prison to confront this killer face to face. Jesperson claims to have encountered Jane Doe at a highway truck stop. In his version of events, she is hungry and broke. He buys her food and promises a ride.
She's willing to have whatever it took to meal in her tummy and a roof over her head out of the rain and everything like that. Probably 3-4 minutes. This is how long a person takes to die. It isn't like on TV where it's 15 seconds, it's overdone. It's not a nice thing.
But Detective Bruce knows that, as with the Crescenzi case, Jesperson takes credit for murders he didn't commit. He has one essential piece of information with which to test Jesperson. He knows that police discovered a flashlight left on the scene. Only the killer would know of its existence.
There has to be one or two things that only the detectives know and the murderer knows that allow us to know that the person we're talking about is in fact a killer. In this case, flashlight.
Detective Bruce asks Jesperson to walk him through the abandonment of Jane Doe's body.
I carried her to the boulders and tossed her down. And when I did so, the flashlight broke off of the handle and flipped somewhere. I felt for it and I couldn't find it.
With this detail confirmed, Detective Bruce is satisfied that Jesperson's confession to the murder of Jane Doe is the truth. But he does not believe that this attention seeker left his flashlight behind accidentally.
My speculation is, every homicide that he committed, he left something somewhere that he can connect to him if he ever had to. He didn't want somebody else getting his credit.
In 2006, Detective Bruce officially charges Jesperson with this brutal crime. He is convicted and awaits sentencing in California. Bruce is still hoping that someone will recognize these sketches and come forward to identify Jane Doe.
The first time I met him was at the Oregon State Prison.
Detective Bruce describes meeting convicted murderer Keith Jesperson.
We go into this large interview room in this very old prison, and they brought Mr. Jesperson in. People describe me as a big guy, but he was bigger than me. Huge hands, bear-like hands, I mean, just huge paws. Very personable, very cooperative. He had no hesitation in talking at all. nice guy. I mean, quite honestly, very nice guy. Would not trust him as far as I could throw him, which isn't very far.
Bruce wants to better understand this man who may have killed his Jane Doe.
I would not want to be a woman who angered him. That seemed to be his trigger. He said he picked up a lot of women. Everything was normal. He was, I guess, fond of picking up prostitutes at truck stops and did it quite frequently. Described several times having perfectly normal relationships with other people, long-term relationships. If you're able to make it past the first 15 minutes with the guy, you're probably safe, or not. One of his victims was a longtime friend of his who he, as he described, she says, you know what, my life is pretty much over, I just want to die, and he laughs about it. And he goes, really? And she says, yeah, you know, I wish I was just dead. Well, I can make that happen. Oh, really? Okay. And he kills her. Whether that's true or not, I don't know. He told a couple of stories that just really probably couldn't have happened the way he described them.
But it is Detective Bruce's assessment that this man is telling the truth about killing his Jane Doe.
And in this particular case, he described being on the road for a long time. The weather was foul and it made him more irritable. When he went to the rest area on I-5 with the victim, the only way I can describe it is that Mr. Jesperson would, in his mind, write a script for how this relationship was going to go. And I asked him, I said, so if a prostitute was loving and caring, would that anger you? And he goes, no. And that's what I wanted. He wanted to believe that for the time that they were with him, that they cared about him, that they loved him, that when they made love to him, they were enjoying it. It wasn't an act for money. It was an act because they cared about him. And I'm just guessing, but the combination between his being extremely tired, her being, in his words, rough in how she pursued sex, it was business, it wasn't intimate, and rewriting the script, if you will, that was the trigger for him. I noticed that when he talked about his other murders in the interview, there was also that same component of disappointment. They did not live up to his expectation. And if they failed to fulfill that role, that was possibly the trigger. I don't know. I'll never know, maybe never know, unless he tells us. And that would be his sole prerogative to do that. I would like him to, but I don't know if he ever will.
Detective Bruce needs Jesperson's help in identifying this Jane Doe. During their interview, he has Jesperson look at police sketches.
When I took this sketch, he goes, yeah, other than the hair, yeah, that's her. And those are almost his exact words. This is the one I think probably most accurately describes her at the time of the murder. Every time I look at the eyes, on that photograph, I see pain. If you look at the gaunt cheeks, the pallor of a long-term alcoholic or drug user, that's a homeless person. That's somebody who's been out in the rain.
The sketches are Bruce's only hope of bringing closure to the case.
The plan is to take these, create a poster, and then what I will do is I'll go on a road trip, and I'm going to post it in every county jail from basically the Oregon border down to Sacramento, maybe a little bit beyond, every truck stop, every low-income housing complex or trailer area that I can find. Somebody out there knows her, and I'm hoping that that's where my lead is going to come from, somebody who knew her, and if nothing else, just give me the next step in this journey of identifying her. All I know is I wouldn't want to be dumped here. She's nothing more than a piece of trash to him at that point. She's lost her value to him in any way, shape, or form. So hopefully we'll be able to identify her and bring some sense of closure to her family if she has any. And me as well.
To understand the mind of Keith Jesperson, Dr. Stone must examine his life and his crimes. January 1990, Portland, Oregon. Jesperson's first murder. He meets Tanya Bennett in a local bar and convinces her to come home with him. He rapes and strangles her, then calmly disposes of the evidence. No one questions Jesperson. He is not a suspect. He is proud to have gotten away with murder. But 2 months later, pride turns to envy when the names of Laverne Pavlinac and John Sosnovsky are splashed across the headlines. They are eventually convicted of the murder of Tanya Bennett. Not content to remain in the shadows, Jesperson pens detailed confessions on bathroom walls in Oregon and Montana. But it goes unnoticed. Over the next 5 years, Jesperson roams the highways, killing at least 5 more women, and demanding acknowledgement for his crimes through letters to police and the media. He creates an infamous persona, the Happy Face Killer.
Jesperson's letters to the media are calling cards motivated by ego and reflect extreme narcissism. Public recognitions of his acts is, ironically, more important than remaining free. This need for attention probably developed early in his life.
1955. Born in rural British Columbia, Jesperson's family soon relocates to Washington State. As a child, he is teased and bullied by other children. He claims to have been neglected and abused by his father, a charge his father disputes. Hungry for approval, he begins killing the stray animals that his father finds a nuisance. Jesperson's first victim is a cat, which he strangles with his bare hands.
Animal torture becomes a desperate attempt to prove his dominance. Through taking a life, Jesperson would have learned a sense of power and control that would later escalate to murder. And murder, he learned, was a way to win recognition.
The 1990s. Working as a long-haul trucker in the Pacific Northwest, Jesperson begins targeting prostitutes and women in bars. Not satisfied to simply strangle his victims, it is said that he begins playing a death game, choking them to the brink of death, then reviving them to intensify their fear, repeating that process again and again. He ends their life when he eventually grows tired.
Taking of a human life was nothing. I had done it so many times, it was nothing. It's like walking your dog. Once you do it around the block, you could walk your dog blindfolded.
1994. Restless, Jesperson creates a new game of dominance and control. He writes a letter to an Oregon State courthouse claiming he killed Tanya Bennett 4 years earlier. He reveals details only the killer would know. When his letter goes unnoticed, he writes directly to the Oregonian newspaper demanding to be heard. The letter is signed with a happy face. March 10th, 1995. For the first time, Jesperson claims the life of someone he knows. Police question him, and although he remains a prime suspect, he is released. Jesperson's obsessive need for attention overwhelms his desire to remain free. In a letter to his brother, he confesses his crimes. Within days, he is arrested. Once in custody, Jesperson reveals himself to be the Happy Face Killer. In 1998, he pleads guilty to the murders of 4 women, including Tanya Bennett.
Guilty, Your Honor.
Laverne Pavlinac and John Sosnovsky are cleared of all charges.
It was fun. It was humorous at times to see the craziness, not of what I've caused, but of the justice system.
Jesperson is sentenced to life in prison.
It may never be possible to know how many victims Keith Jesperson truly killed. In placing him in my scale, I must consider the damage he does by simply claiming crimes. Keith Jesperson is a cold-blooded psychopathic schemer driven by a powerful need for attention. And unfortunately, in a way, by profiling him here, we are playing into his perverse craving for acknowledgement. For his crimes and numerous claims of others, I place him at a level 18 on my scale, the level reserved for psychopaths preoccupied with murder and who also commit torture to a relatively brief degree.
Attention-seeking killers create fear through their crimes and through their games with the media. By forcing their names onto the front page, they make the public live with terror, day in and day out. Dr. Stone investigates their callous treatment of their victims and their manipulation of the public's emotions as he strives to understand and quantify what makes a killer most evil.